Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So both of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel a number of times before. When it comes to the home brewery, I would say they are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever we're going to call them, IPAs, but also for their modern, fruity, juicy Nordic sours, whatever we're going to call them, the Berliner Weisses and Goses and things like this, whereas the away brewery has developed a reputation for being a more kind of solid all-round brewery. I've had lots of different styles from them, but in recent times they have been doing some really nice New England hazies actually. So quite curious to see what the second collaboration beer involving both of these guys on the channel is going to be like, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. Hopefully it's another interesting beer, and hopefully it makes for a good review. So yeah, for the home side of things then, we are going to head up toward Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Always got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition. And for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters, as it would be in English. So this particular beer is called After Cheese. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this is a New England hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA, and it's brewed in collaboration with Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri, who come from Åre up in Jämtland, quite a famous skiing town, actually, somewhere that I do need to go and visit. But yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for September of 2022, and it is supposed to be pretty damn nice actually. But like I said, we've had some very good New England hazies from Svartbergets and from Fermenterarna over the last couple of years, so quite curious to see what another collaboration involving these guys is going to have in store for us. I think the last beer that I reviewed from these guys actually was an Imperial Stout, if I remember correctly. They brewed an Imperial Stout together at Svartbergets, which was very, very good. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both the breweries involved in this one before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Fermenterarna and from Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri. We will no doubt add more to both of those lists in the near future, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel, and the support you give the channel is massively appreciated. And you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlists. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at the brewery notes. So we'll start off with Fermenterarna then, since these guys are the home brewery in this case. So Fermenterarna was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, and they founded the company together back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, a little bit to the north of Gothenburg and very close to the Norwegian border. A very picturesque fishing village from what I've heard, so somewhere that I do want to visit. But apparently Niklas's love of beer started one day when he ordered a beer in a bar without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Dugges Brewery. And in my mind, this is one of the kind of cult classic Swedish craft beers. It's a collaboration with Stillwater Artisanal from the US, and yeah, it's awesome. You need to try that. But he ordered this one day without knowing what it was, and he was just kind of blown away with it. But on the other hand, Anna has had a long interest in things that ferment, and she also ran the Coasters Trädgårdar restaurant, and she's done various things there, such as sourdough bread, sauerkraut, pretty much if you name it, she's played with it and fermented it and things like this. So yeah, Anna had a long background with fermentation. But when they started out, they only had a very small 200-litre brew kit and some tanks, and then in late 2018, they actually took a break to expand the company after they had attended some local beer festivals and their beers were received very, very well. But they then had a new facility with two 500-litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres. And they were aiming to brew around 50,000 litres over the course of 2019, but they said that they had the equipment to brew around 250,000 litres of beer per year. Over the next little while, they continued to build up their reputation and expand the company a little bit, and they just got themselves out there a little bit more, but they became very, very well respected. In August of 2021, they moved to a new brewery in the Hisingen area in Gothenburg, and they took their equipment with them, but they also bought a new 3,000 litre brew kit later in the year, and they do plan to open up a tap room and restaurant in the near future as well, from what I gather. But these guys, as I say, have built up a very good reputation for their New England hazy IPAs, but also for their big fruity juicy sours. So whenever it comes to the Lokalt Småskaligt releases through Systembolaget, this is one of the breweries that I always keep an eye out for. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 145 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. And yeah, they are one of the Swedish breweries that you really should keep an eye on at the moment. But yeah, that's everything I can tell you about Fermenterarna for the moment. Like I say, check them out if you like big, modern, fruity, juicy sour beers or New England hazy IPAs. You can check out their brewery website in the video description below, check out their social media, or you can check out some of my old reviews, and the Untappd page will tell you a lot about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's go on to the away side of things then. We'll head a little bit further north to Jämtland for this one. So Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri, or the Black Mountains Mountain Brewery, if we want to translate it into English. But yeah, Svartbergets, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Åre in Jämtland, and the company was founded back in 2017. So the brewery was originally based in the basement of the Åre the ski restaurant, and the main man behind the brewing is Philip Hafstad, who had been a home brewer for about 6 years previously, and he joined the company after a period of time working in Asia. So the restaurant is a family business, and it was founded in 1980 when Arne Hafstad built the restaurant on the hill. But at the restaurant, they have 10 different taps, and originally they actually had to transport the beer up the hill by bike every week to sell it in the bar. But later in 2019, owing to the success of their beers, they decided that they were going to invest more in the brewery side of the business, and so they opened up a second and larger production facility in Brewed, which is equipped with a 2,000 litre brewing system, and they also hired Sebastian Torneus as the brewer, and he's been doing a lot to develop new recipes and things like this. But they've gradually expanded their output, and over the course of 2020 they produced around 100,000 litres, and they estimate that eventually they could produce 350,000 litres from the facility that they have, and they are, from what I understand, gradually just working up to that, and we'll see what happens later on. But over the last few years they've basically been building up their portfolio of different beers, getting their name out there a little bit more, and they've been quite successful in that. But as of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 60 different kinds of beers, and they do a whole host of different things. We've had a lager or two from them before, if I remember rightly. We've had an Imperial Stout. I think we've had a black IPA from them as well, if I remember correctly. But like I said earlier, they have been producing quite a few New England hazies in recent times. So we'll need to try a few different styles from Svartbergets over the next little while, I think. But as I say, a very solid all-round brewery in my experience. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about them for the moment. Again, if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on social media, check out the Untappd page to learn some different things about the different beers that they do, and you can of course check out my older reviews that I've done too. But yeah, let's crack on and actually have a look at the beer itself then. That's the end of the brewery history section of this video. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see the after cheese on the back, I should say. You can see the nice artwork that you always get from Fermenterarna, and I would love to know who does the artwork on these beers. I don't think it says, I think we've looked at this before, but you can see on the back of the can, there is the Fermenterarna symbol with the nice bottle and the Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri symbol. You can see we've got a two-headed mouse on the front there, which is good. It's in a golden topped can, this one. I believe I paid about 60 Swedish kronor for this beer, so that is about €6, maybe £5.50 sterling, somewhere in the region of, what's that going to be, maybe about $7 American, something like that. But yeah, it looks very, very nice. from the outside. And as I said, I know that Svartbergets and Fermenterarna are very capable when it comes to this particular style. But I will point out this is the first triple IPA, if I'm not mistaken, that I've had from Fermenterarna or Svartberget. So we've had lots of New England hazies from both, but not a triple. The hops in this one, incidentally, are Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo and Sabro, so we know all of these quite well, all American hops. So Citra, 14% alpha acid, big juicy mango notes and quite a lemon-limey character. Simcoe is going to give you that nice kind of juicy passion fruit, and again that's about 12% alpha acid. Amarillo is about 12% alpha acid, again big kind of oily zesty orangey character, and Sabro is going to give you that kind of sharper mandarin-y orange, but also a good little bit of coconut. From what I remember. But yeah, after cheese, 10% New England Hazy Imperial Triple IPA, double dry hopped as well, of course it says on the can. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm really curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. This will be quite nice, I think. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. Now that's curious. This one is definitely not the haziest of New Englands that I've had from either of these two breweries, but it does say that it contains oat and wheat malt, and remember that is one of the things that kind of defines a New England hazy IPA, is the fact that it contains oat and wheat malt. So yeah, that is quite interesting just from the pour. So before the head disappears on this one then, you can see that it's poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would actually say perfect white head. That is fading away to be a very thin foamy layer, kind of understandable when you consider what the alcohol content of this beer is. But yeah, it actually has a little bit more of a kind of natural haze to it than the big opaque type thing that you will normally get from the New England IPAs. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, but overall it looks very nice actually, but definitely more, it looks a little bit more like one of these beers that you would term an American IPA, you know, somewhere between the New England and the West Coast, rather than being an all-out New England. But yeah, lovely kind of bright yellow colour this one. It's a bit more like a kind of mango juice colour, but remember the colour of these beers depends on the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. The length of your wort ball is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel age you do or any adjunct you put in will affect it too. But when it comes to IPAs, for the most part, we don't need to care about those latter two variables that I mentioned. But yeah, definitely not the haziest of New England IPAs that I've come across. That's definitely fair to say. Other than that, I don't think we need to say anything about the appearance of this beer. So why don't we crack on and have a little look at the aroma before we taste it. So yeah, let's do this. Yeah, that's really interesting. So this one's interesting in the sense that when I smell this, it's actually quite farmhousey and crackery and bread crusty, and that's quite different from what I've had from Fermenterarna or Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri before. Most of their beers, you know, the Fermenterarna ones always tend to have a little bit of that kind of yeasty, farmhousey character in the aroma. I'm curious to see whether this translates into the actual flavour profile of the beer. So, you know, Fermenterarna always have this, but not quite as strong as I'm picking up this time. And from memory, the Svartbergets New England IPA has always tended to be a little bit more kind of oaty and creamy leaning. So yeah, this is very, very curious. It says on the side here, this is a creamy triple IPA brewed together with our friends from the mountains, Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri. It doesn't tell you if it's well, I was wondering if it was an oat cream IPA or something like this, but no. But aroma-wise, this really is a kind of more farmhousey one. I'm getting a bit of that kind of vegetal quality out of it too, which is really quite interesting. Yeah, very, very curious about this actually. I think this is going to be one of these beers that tastes quite different from how it smells, to be honest with you. And it's not unheard of to have beers that behave like that. But yeah, let's break this down for you. So, backbone of this beer, you absolutely get a little bit of a kind of you get a little bit of that kind of slightly well-fired bread crust note out, like a morning roll. There is a bit of a good grainy bread crusty backbone to this beer. On top of that, there's a good little bit of kind of brown wholemeal bread. And then beyond that, you start to get some of the white bread. And so this is quite a bready, it really is a very bready leaning IPA, this one. I'm not getting so much of the wheaty bitiness that you can sometimes get from the style, and I'm not getting overly much of the big oaty creamy notes that you get from this one. As I've always said, for me there are 6 different kind of variables to consider with the New England IPA. So you can get the kind of farmhousey yeasty character, the rye leaning grainy side of things, the wheaty bitey notes, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and also the kind of sweetness. And this one to me is actually kind of farmhousey in some ways, but it's also got a little bit of that almost rye type graininess to it, but it doesn't say anything about it containing like rogue malt or rye bread or anything like this. So yeah, the aroma of this one, I will be honest with you and say the aroma of this beer, I don't find it overly pleasant. It has that farmhousey, vegetally kind of thing to it, which I'm not a great fan of. So I'll say that I don't like the aroma of this one all that much. But yeah, as I say, a bit of kind of more grainy bread crust, some brown bread in there, a little bit of white bread. At the back of the nose, you do get a little hint of a kind of wheaty bitiness. But not too much. You can smell the wheat sort of densifying the whole beer. But then on top of that, there's a little bit of the oaty creaminess, and you are getting little bits and bobs of kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy character out of this beer. But definitely, compared to the other beers that I've had both from Svartbergets and from Fermenterarna, the malty side of this beer doesn't come across as being all that nice from the aroma perspective. But let's look at the let's look at the kind of malty, the fruity and hoppy side of the beer for sure. So the fruity and hoppy side of things is a little bit better. So for me, you get a little bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal quality for sure, and that kind of builds a good bridge with the more sort of farmhousey character that this beer has. But the green component for me, it leans toward quite a bright but still quite oily grassy note, and there is a little bit of there is a little touch of floral character in there, but I would say that this one is more sort of grassy, and I would say that this one is a little bit more kind of grassy and oily from its green perspective, from its green component. But remember, these beers, the New Englands, they rely mainly on late addition and dry hopping. So the 3 different types of hoppings. Early addition hopping is where you pretty much get all your bitterness. That's within the first hour of the wort boil. The late addition hopping is within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. But then the dry hopping is pretty much all about flavour and aroma. New England IPAs rely mainly on the latter two. They've got very little early addition hopping, whereas West Coast IPAs use all 3, but they have got quite a bit of early addition hopping. That's why they're a lot more bitter. But yeah, the green component of this one is not especially deep, so that tells me late addition and dry hopping is the main focus with this beer. When it comes to the fruity side of things, it's quite oily overall from that perspective. You know, you've got some really nice kind of more pungent passion fruit in there from the Citra, but you've got that big oily mango in there too, and that's going to come both from the Simcoe and the Citra at the same time. But I think the Simcoe is doing a little bit of work to mellow out the Simcoe is doing a little bit of work to kind of mellow out the it's doing a little bit to sort of mellow out the kind of the passion fruit as well. So you've got a nice bit of stronger, more pungent passion fruit, but also some nice juicy notes as well. And then you can definitely pick up the kind of coconutty notes from the Sabro. And that, I think the Sabro dominates the Amarillo a little bit, to be honest with you. But yeah, there is a nice little bit of a more oily orange in there and a brighter tangerine than the kind of coconutty notes underneath it. So I wonder how much of this kind of herbal, vegetally sort of thing that this beer has is actually coming from Sabro, because I've noticed this. Certain yeasts can interact very interestingly with Sabro actually, so we'll need to see how that plays out in this beer itself. But like I will be honest and say, the aroma that you get out of this one is not my favourite that I've had from either Svartbergets or from Fermenterarna. But it's definitely worth taking a bit of time to enjoy that and get used to that before you actually get stuck into the beer. But I think it is about time that we taste this one. So yeah, this is the After Cheese New England Hazy Imperial Triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg in collaboration with Svartbergets Fjällbryggeri from Aroma in Jämtland. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, that is very, very nice. I'm so glad because I really did not like the kind of vegetal herbal aroma that this beer had, but it does taste really quite nice actually. It's a lovely big oily, creamy and just juicy IPA this actually. Just on first impression, I would say that this one strikes me as more of one of these kind of American IPAs rather than a straight up New England hazy. So that's something to bear in mind with this one. It has got a little bit more. When it comes to American IPA, I would always refer to these as being somewhere in the middle of the West Coast. Like quite often they have a bit of the oily character in the fruits and the sweetness from the West Coast IPA, but they have more of the New England breadiness. This one, to me, if I was tasting this blind, I would think it's an American IPA rather than being an all-out sort of New England hazy. But I think that is what they say. It does just say a double dry hopped triple IPA. So maybe I shouldn't have called it a New England hazy. But regardless, we can argue about the style category all day. It is pretty damn nice, this. So thumbs up to both Svartbergets and Fermenterarna with this one. They've done a solid job here. And I'm very thankful it tastes a lot better than it smells. Yeah. So, where do we start with this beer then? The first impression is it's a big, oily, sweet beer, this one. I like this. This is going to be nice to sip on over the next hour or two, actually. But yeah, where do we start with this? This is a bit of a monster, this thing. Yeah, very, very nicely done. So, in the middle of the palate then, middle third of the palate, so backbone of the beer, you do get a little touch of, bread crusty, grainy character there. This beer tastes very different from how it smells. We've said that already. But yeah, you get a little bit of that fresh white bread, hedgehog roll bread crust forming the backbone of the beer. But on top of that, you get a little bit of the you get a little touch of a kind of fluffy white bready note, but right above that you get the wheat just thickening out the whole thing. Like the bready layer in this beer is actually very dense. So yeah, you get that nice big dense white bready note out of this one for sure, and that's the wheat that's giving you that. On top of that kind of more dense white bready layer, you can feel the nice oaty character, and the oats again, they are creamy to an extent, but they are still quite dense together. And I mean, that's the thing with this triple IPA. That's the density of these flavors, and also the sweetness that this one has really makes me think, yeah, more of an American IPA rather than a triple. So that's definitely an interesting point we need to make about this particular beer. So on top of the dense oaty layer that you have, on top of that you get some nice kind of oily brown sugary notes out of this. So this IPA really leans toward that kind of sweeter end of the spectrum too. We have to keep that in mind. So if you start in the dead centre of your palate, you do get this pretty much straight up caramel note. As you move further out from that, it mellows out and you start to get more of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. And as you just reach the edge of the middle third of your palate, it's more McVitie's digestive biscuit like. It is really more like that. So yeah, and all of that sits on top of that kind of dense oaty layer that you get out of this beer. So yeah, the way that this goes together is really quite interesting. The malty side of this beer is quite nice, but like I say, it is, and this is a bit of a step back. I think I have had more malty New Englands from Fermenterarna. I don't think so much from Svartbergets, but this is a very very malty IPA. This one compared to what I've had from either of the breweries, I think. A lot more malty than than the maltiest, if we can call them that, of beers that I've had from Svartbergets. But like I say, it's quite, yeah, bread crust, white bread, the thicker wheaty layer, the oaty creamy denseness, then on top of that the brown sugar layer that I've just described. This is interesting for sure, and I like this. This is a nice sipper for the rest of the afternoon on my day off. So yeah, the border region between middle third and back third of the palate with this one, you do get a little bit of that bready build up there. The base of the back third of the palate again is a little bit more bread crusty. You start to get a bit more graininess out of it. You can feel that the white bready layer is a little bit taller, and then you do get a little bit of wheaty bitiness on the back third of your tongue there, which I think is really nice. So yeah. So yeah, a little bit of wheaty bitiness there, kind of bread crust. Yeah, as I say, a little bit of bread crust, more fluffy white bread in there. It's a little bit more airy, of course. It feels taller than the bitier wheat on top of that. Then above that, you start to get some of the more kind of airy, yeasty notes out of the beer. So there's a little bit of that woody, crackery, airy, farmhousey bread. So definitely on the back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So it's quite interesting from that perspective for sure. Yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. So, yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. And then as you move further forward, it develops a little bit of a herbal character. And I think that builds a good bridge between the yeast. I think Fermenterarna have their own kind of house yeasts that give you this herbally, vegetally, farmhousey type vibe. You always find this in their beers, even though this is one of the more malty ones that they've done. But yeah, as you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you start to get a more floral, aromatic character out of this beer, which is quite interesting. So yeah, that's kind of interesting too for sure. But then yeah, you do get a nice little bit of, there is a bit of spiciness on the front corners of the palate too, but round the front curve of the tongue it's definitely more oily and it's got a slight grassy zestiness to it actually. So yeah, that's quite interesting. I think that's most likely to come from Amarillo out of the hops that are in this, and maybe the Citra to a degree. But let's focus on that front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up there. The base of the front third of your palate is a nice kind of smooth white bready note. There's a bit of that oaty smoothness on top of that. Then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, this one's kind of showing you it's quite straightforward in its fruity notes actually, and I think it works very well with that sort of more, caramelly, butterscotchy, malty type of beer that we have with this one. The fruits go together really well. So at the back of the front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a slightly more pungent passion fruit. That's the Citra that's giving you that. But as you move forward, it very, very quickly mellows out. So you're getting a more juicy passion fruit from the Simcoe and the Citra, and then a nice big kind of oily mango character out of this one as well, which I think is really interesting. Underneath that, of course, you start to get a little bit of there are little notes like an apricot, papaya type thing. You get some of these drier tropical fruits, but as you move into the front half of that front third of the tongue, you definitely get a wee bit more of you certainly get a little bit more of a mix. You get a brighter tangerine note on top, but then you get the more oily orange underneath. So the oily orange is the Amarillo, and then that gets zestier and zestier as you reach the front tip of the tongue. But then on top of that, yeah, you've got that brighter tangerine note, which is coming from the Sabro. I don't get too much in the way of coconut out of this one until the aftertaste. There is a little bit of that coconutty pina colada type thing from the there is a little bit of that coconutty pina colada type thing from the Sabro in this, but that, as I say, doesn't come out to the aftertaste. But I really like the way the fruits come together in this one. I actually quite like that this one's a little bit more kind of malty and orangey and soft tropical fruit leaning. I think the way that those two things combine in this beer is probably the highlight of it. But yeah, it's a really interesting one and quite different in terms of IPAs compared to what I've had from either Fermenterarna or Svartbergets. So it's a thumbs up from me. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So it's definitely a full-bodied beer. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's very clean, but at the same time it's quite oily and slick. IBU wise, I think this is quite low. I think, you know, this is probably about a 30, maybe 40 IBU beer at the absolute most. The green component isn't too pungent in this one. The malt base has a nice degree of smoothness to it, but it's actually quite oily and chewy and sticky in some ways. And as we said, the fruity notes in this one, there's a good balance between, there's a little bit of tropical fruit there to back it up, but I really think this one gets more and more orangey and oily the more that you drink of it. But yeah, I think it is a very, very nice beer, this one. And I wonder if the fact that they've called it after cheese, maybe it is supposed to be a beer that you drink after you've had a nice kind of blue cheese or a gorgonzola or something. I could see it fitting quite well with that, with its big oily character actually. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about this one. So yeah, this was the After Cheese, a 10% triple double dry hopped IPA from Fermenterarna in Gothenburg in collaboration with Svartbergets from Aroma up in Jämtland. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Fermenterarna and from Svartbergets. And we will return to both of these breweries very, very soon. Slange, skull, and cheers.